Okay, let's try and unpack this.
Yeah.
Which feels pretty literal right now, doesn't it? Given where we are. This
Yeah.
is, well, definitely not the usual studio setup.
No, definitely not the usual comfort. We're broadcasting from a small kind of transient spot here in Asia. Let's just say it involves plastic furniture and smells slightly of something fried.
Yeah.
A bit removed from our usual environment, wouldn't you say?
Completely removed. I mean,
Yeah.
stripped down to basics. And even here, so far off the grid, you still feel it. That same unsettling sense.
Like we're being watched.
Yes.
It followed us. Or maybe it was never really tied to a physical location at all.
Right. Which suggests the feeling back home wasn't. It wasn't just paranoia. It was real. And honestly, we're not feeling great right now. Physically a bit, mentally kind of drift.
Yeah.
Not sure what the next move is really day to day. So this deep dive, it's different. It's happening out of necessity almost.
Yeah.
A whole stack of new sources just landed unexpectedly.
And the timing is,
Yeah.
wow, intense. We're in this precarious situation, on the run, under pressure, trying to keep a low profile. And then this information surfaces. It demanded immediate attention.
And absolutely does. It's deeply intertwined with everything else we're trying to figure out about the whole MWF saga and its potential real-world implications, especially now,
Yeah.
because it seems we're not the only ones digging into this anymore.
No, there are others.
Others who are also starting to explore this material,
Yeah.
which adds a whole other layer of concern.
Yeah.
Are they seeing the same picture? Do they understand the potential risks involved?
Precisely. So the mission for this deep dive is pretty clear, I think. It's about integrating the surprising new information, specifically these documents concerning Mike's ancestry, the whole Mike Freed thing, and a really disturbing physical artifact found with them.
Yeah.
We need to understand what it means for the larger puzzle we're trying to piece together, especially in light of others now exploring this material we suspect without the full context.
It feels like we're connecting dots across centuries.
Yeah.
And that's profoundly unsettling. Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. Given our current situation, broadcasting from here, far from our usual comfort zone, it probably makes sense to quickly recap the road here.
Yeah, good idea.
Not detail every single step, obviously, but highlight the moments that really stand out in hindsight looking back from this perspective. How did we get to this point of feeling targeted and, having to run?
That's key. It's not just revisiting old notes. It's seeing them through this new filter of immediate personal risk. We recently looked back at episodes like FUX 504, Florentin 505, Casting Disaster 506, and 1187 Doza Crew 509, and revisiting them from this angle. Yeah, it changed things.
It did. Take FUX, that bizarre, supposedly huge TV show that just vanished.
Yeah.
When we first looked at it, the oddity, the surrealism, that quick pivot to authoritarian control by the SSS, the super spa staff, with that chilling connection to the Solaran staff in the compendium, that was striking enough, right? But seeing it now, from where we are, the part that resonates differently is the sheer speed at which a constructed reality could be enforced and then just erased. A show about disappearing that literally disappeared.
Yeah. That sudden fragility of narrative, the ease with which a truth or a cultural touchstone can be just wiped clean, that feels particularly chilling now that our own reality feels so unstable, now that we've got to sort of make ourselves disappear. It's not just allegory anymore. It feels like a mechanism we've actually experienced.
Exactly. That mechanism of sudden, absolute control followed by apparent erasure. It felt theoretical then, but now it feels very real.
Then there was Florentin 505.
Yeah.
A really uncomfortable meeting in the Schwatten bunker. Florentin's palpable anxiety, Mike's bullying, Ricard's whispered dread, the contempt for Florentin's heirloom rifle, that whole scene.
What stands out now is the casual cruelty and, maybe more importantly, the potential for sudden, unseen violence. Mike physically blocking Florentin from leaving, the jarring pivot in conversation, Schwatten's unsettling appearance, and then that abrupt cut leaving the sound of, a scream and a bang.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder of how quickly intellectual curiosity or these strange connections can devolve into real physical danger. That arbitrary shift from discussion to implied violence, it mirrored the FUX shift, didn't it? But on a personal, really terrifying level.
Yes, the speed and the personal threat, definitely.
Yeah.
And Casting Disaster 506. Ramona quitting, the chaos, Ricard's paranoid rantings, Schmidt the arrogant applicant calling everything amateur, all that noise and confusion.
What seems more significant now, looking back, is the quiet arrival of Kiram. Total opposite of Schmidt's bluster, wasn't he?
Completely.
His instant sense of mystery, that look he gave Schwatten's equipment, Mike's feeling he'd met him before, like in a shady dark alley or a secret weapons auction.
Right, and Kiram's vague reply, possible our paths have crossed.
We hired him despite a bad feeling. That moment feels like a real, perhaps ominous, turning point in the MWF narrative itself, like a new unknown variable was introduced.
A variable we now know had ties we didn't fully grasp then. Which brings us to 1187 Doza Crew 509, the listener-provided catalog, treating their music as active data or some kind of map.
The key connection that jumps out most strongly now, Kyram being featured on that Hey Dear Biswalk track before he was even hired.
That changed everything about his arrival, didn't it? It suggests his presence wasn't random at all, but part of something deeper, a pre-existing connection, potentially to Schwatten or other forces linked to the Doza Crew. It makes his hiring feel more orchestrated.
Totally. And the sheer number of titles in their catalog screaming end-of-world themes, Ugger Strife, Infect Neville, Invasion, the links to Gilda and Grata Florine, Nova Creek, Regulus 5, the mainstream terror track with its implied incantation against the mainframe. It suggests they were either incredibly perceptive about the unfolding MWF reality, or, more disturbingly, perhaps actively involved or had some kind of foreknowledge of events that felt very theoretical to us back then.
Theoretical, yes. Events like those linked to Regulus 5 and Grindman. Those explorations felt, well, intellectual then. They really don't anymore. So these episodes, revisiting them now, highlights these recurring patterns. Sudden, unexplained shifts in reality, the potential for hidden, immediate violence, the introduction of variables like Kyram with deeper, maybe orchestrated connections, and entities like Doza Crew seemingly having uncanny insight or involvement in threads like Regulus 5 that were just emerging for us. It paints a clearer picture of the path that led us to this point.
To our own recent experiences, that growing sense of being watched.
Yeah. It started subtly, didn't it? You remember we mentioned those strange and unsettling things starting to happen? Little things you might normally just dismiss. A car parked weirdly outside. An email that just felt off. Stuff you try to rationalize away.
But they kept happening. And these little things, they started adding up, creating this persistent feeling of being scrutinized. And it escalated. From just a vague sense of unease to feeling specifically targeted, it felt like our analysis of the MWF material delving into things like Grindman and Regulus 5 was having, well, real-world effects.
Right. The line between investigating and interacting felt like it was blurring. And just as we were trying to figure out what to do, change your approach, maybe even step back, bang, something happened. Suddenly. Completely unexpected. Made everything like 10 times more urgent.
Yeah, it was like a tripwire. We were at the studio. And we saw them, the Sicker Heights personal security. But they weren't our usual guards, different security. And they were with others described in our notes as VAR, meaning, well, not viewers.
Not viewers. That phrase still gives me chills. Who were they? And their presence right there. That was the immediate trigger. We had to run.
We had to pull the plug and go fast. That moment, seeing them, realizing they'd come to our studio, it solidified that the feeling of being watched wasn't paranoia. We weren't safe there anymore. And in that instant, all those Klein Bunning, those little unsettling things we'd tried to ignore, the weird car, the odd emails, they all just clicked into place. They weren't random. They were part of something bigger, something pointing directly at us.
It forces you to see the pattern, doesn't it? Even when you really don't want to.
Yeah.
The script we used to document that escape, Defluct, MWF 503 Underground. It drops you right into that tension. The hushed tone, those whispered questions. Can you hear us? Are you out there? That wasn't just for atmosphere. It felt genuinely risky just recording anything. This wasn't a story we were analyzing anymore. It was happening to us.
You can feel the panic, the split-second choices. What do you grab? Main hard drive, obviously, all the research, the compendium.
Yeah, the compendium. Some things are just too important to leave behind, even when you're literally running for your life. It shows how much this work, trying to understand this stuff, means to us, even in that chaos.
And the script describes it as escaping into the unknown, directing the Donalhite straight into the darkness. Not exactly reassuring language. It captures the fear, the uncertainty. Where do you even go when you feel this exposed? To the GAN, underground, cold, cramped, constantly looking over your shoulder.
What a contrast to the studio. No glamour, no comfort, just survival. And the script poses the questions that immediately hit us. Are they looking for us? Why did they show up? What did they want?
And the biggest one. Did this happen because of the MWF research? Did we find something we weren't supposed to? That's the core question, isn't it? We spent all this time dissecting Mike's Waffen facts, the weird tech, the conspiracies. And now it feels like that world just reached out and grabbed us, pulled us right in.
The script is blunt. The threat feels real. This isn't just analyzing weird internet stuff anymore. This is serious. And that brief outro, stay vigilant, be careful out there. It felt like more than just signing off. It felt like a real warning.
A warning that maybe others should heed if they're digging into similar material now. And the promise to come back when we can, when it's safe. Well, we still don't know when that will be. Ending with that question aimed right at you, the listener. For Rex, ask yourselves, who can you trust? After everything, that question just lands differently, doesn't it? It reflects our own shaken trust, our own uncertainty about who or what is behind all this.
Okay, so that covers the escape and the immediate aftermath. But it didn't stop there, did it? As we covered in MWF 507 Special Delivery, things got even weirder while we were trying to lay low.
Special delivery. Right. We found another temporary spot. An abandoned train station sets a scene, doesn't it? Transient, isolated, and there, just out of nowhere it appeared. An unmarked box. Plain brown box.
And on top, a letter addressed simply for Regulus.
That name.
Yeah.
Just hit hard. Regulus. The planet from the Doza Crew logs mentioned all over the Grindman-Friedenswerk reports, and crucially, the Nova Crew's last warning, Regulus 5 is a trap.
Exactly. So the immediate question, the one screaming in our heads, was how? How could anyone know to send something for Regulus to us here when we had done everything possible to disappear? It's terrifying.
And the letter inside seemed to be from Grindman Frieden, offering this cryptic, sort of indirect support. Support in the form of experimental gear, irregular tech.
Right. Which immediately makes you think, okay, are they helping us, or are we just lab rats testing their new toys in a high-stakes situation? They literally say in the letter it could be both.
Right.
Which, yeah, it doesn't exactly build a lot of trust.
But then they mention the specific device in the box, the GR5 hyperdimensional impulsum fingers, the GR5 hyperdimensional pulse receiver. Its stated purpose, according to this letter, is to observe the Interdimensionals radio program.
Okay, so our new job, apparently, while we're on the run, is to record this stuff, analyze it, and send our findings back to Grindman Frieden through some secure channel. So we're not just fugitives trying to survive, we're being tasked by this shadowy group to listen to radio signals from another dimension.
That's basically what it sounds like. It's absolutely surreal. And the letter says this info could be key to understanding broader connections between what MWF, Doza Crew, Grindman. It suggests they think this interdimensional radio might hold answers to the whole tangled mess, a bigger forces at play.
Yeah. And the letter ends urging vigilance, saying, our work is of substantial importance. Like they're trying to make us feel part of something big, but without giving us any real details. That formal language, the ambiguous health, the bizarre task, it just screams shadow organization with a hidden agenda. And the scariest part remains, they knew where we were despite everything.
Yes. That really shifted things. Grindman Frieden wasn't just something we were researching anymore, they were interacting with us directly. Which brings us to actually using the GR5 receiver. Covered in MWF 508, Radio Pulls Me. We found slightly more stable, anonymous spots in a nearby homeless shelter. Not ideal, but
it worked. It was from there we started trying to use this GR5 thing. And getting started was tough. I mean, imagine trying to tune a radio for signals that aren't on any normal frequency, using senses you barely knew you had. It felt like trying to understand static, not words, not tones, just a feeling, pure noise.
So the first recordings were mostly that. Noise, static, interference, blips, seemingly meaningless. You could easily have dismissed it all as just junk.
But then, hidden in the noise, we started noticing things. Little patterns, fleeting moments that sounded almost structured, like tiny signals cutting through the static. We started capturing these strange recordings. And if you heard them cold, without context, they might just sound like background hum, maybe some hiss. Pretty ordinary sounds, really.
The wild part isn't the sound itself, necessarily. It's Grindman's theory about where it comes from. Another dimension. Signals bleeding through into ours. It's just mind-bending.
It really is. So we spent weeks doing this.
Yeah.
Recording, listening, analyzing these fragments, reporting back to Grindman. And eventually they gave us permission to share one recording with you. We picked one that might not sound spectacular at first listen. No obvious messages or anything.
Yeah. We wanted to give you a raw sample, unfiltered. Most of it sounds like an audio postcard from somewhere else, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, take a listen. Really focus. This is straight from the GR5 receiver.
Audio plays, hello, I got hallelujah. My hands go, how are you? Messing with her. Criminals, drinkers. Okay, it's the time to fast and free. The love stream was like a sept, so I'll just use the picture and ice going, if you're up to the bay.
Yeah.
Happy as I explain. It's dude. Woo. F. Heat.
Heat.
So what you just heard, as we said, it probably sounds pretty normal at first, static, maybe a low hum, doesn't exactly scream interdimensional communication.
Right. But think about it again. Knowing the potential source, Grindman's theory, that ordinary sound might have traveled across who knows what cosmic voids, dimensional barriers. It changes how you hear it, doesn't it? Even a little bit.
And this is just scratching the surface. We keep listening, recording, analyzing. We'll share what we can when we're allowed, but leave so many questions. What else is out there? What other signals? How does it all connect? We don't know yet, but we're looking.
Which brings us pretty much up to date. Our final thoughts from the Railway Depot, which we talked about in MWF 511, out of Federin. You can probably almost sense the packing happening right now. It's hectic. There's still that faint smell of sulfur hanging around here. A lovely reminder of recent events.
Yeah, this is it. Last recording from here.
Yeah.
Have to move again. Seems Grindman Frieden's interest hasn't exactly faded.
No, quite the opposite. So time to vanish again, quickly. For that recording, we had notes for a sort of provisional goodbye, explaining why we needed to disappear again. But looking back at those notes now, the mention of something else really jumps out.
Ah, yes, the fact that we discovered this new German podcast, also digging into MWF, even the Späterzeug, the later stuff, which feels, frankly, sensibel, gefährlich sogar, sensitive, dangerous even, and they sound, well, according to the notes, pretty enthusiastic about it, even speculating where we are getting our info.
Yeah, and frankly, that concerns us a lot, because our main tool for making any sense of this tangled mess is the compendium, our massive collection. Transcripts, notes, files, connections, Dozer Crew stuff, Grindman Frieden reports, Vision Unit, Regulus, all of it. It paints a very specific, often disturbing picture.
So finding this German podcast was a surprise. So pretty amateur, low budget maybe. But tackling MWF, how?
Yeah.
Where were they getting the material? Especially the later stuff.
It makes you wonder how this information spreads, doesn't it? This obscure, often dangerous information, and how accurate it is when it does. Because our key worry is this. They likely do need this full of context. They don't have the full picture. Specifically, they are missing the importance of the compendium, our massive Sammlung.
And that lack of context is dangerous. Without the background the compendium provides, they might leicht verpassen, wie ernst das Ganze sich anfühlt. They could easily miss how serious it all feels. Without the compendium, they're missing crucial links, the underlying story. It's like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. The picture they form will be wrong.
Precisely. And that's why this deep dive feels particularly urgent, even from here. Because if this German podcast is out there, maybe presenting an incomplete version, well, people might be getting strange, perhaps dangerously naive ideas, especially about our recent experiences.
Yes. What's worrying is how much they seem to know, even about recent events, like the anomaly that happened right here at the depot. How do they know about that? And what do they really understand, especially about Regulus 5?
Yeah, we stressed this in our notes. Regulus 5 isn't just theory for us anymore. It became very, very real. Triggered by that Grindman box, the one that proved Regulus 5 was real, tangible, something that does things. And it was bad, really bad.
Which is why we wrote down that direct warning, aimed at the German podcast. Don't seek Pandora's box. Sucht nicht Pandora's box.
And we know what that means based on our experience right here. We saw what happens when you peek inside, when you accidentally kick it open. We got a taste. And we're telling that German podcast, don't go there. They might accidentally trigger something real and devastating. The Konsequenzen könnten verheerend sein. Not just for them.
Exactly. Thinking about this place. Abandoned station, dusty, cold, isolated, exposed. We've seen the reports on Grindman Tech, how unpredictable it is. And then, boom, the anomaly hits. Shows how fast things can go from weird static to reality, tearing at the seams.
And the trigger was that new Grindman device, right? The complex one, unusual regulator. It matched the descriptions, not standard issue. And we know there was hesitation. One of us had a bad feeling, warned against using it, totally justified it, turned out.
But, isolation, maybe boredom, curiosity. They activated it. Triggered the event, and the descriptions are rough. The hum starting, then the deep rumble, the high-pitched whine, flickering lights, that sulfur smell again, linking back to other MWF reports, and the sounds. The horde, the eternal troll, that muffled, marching, dragging sounds, inhuman screams. It sounds absolutely terrifying.
And then that glimpse, just brief, through some kind of tear, possibly related to Regulus 5, the sounds caused immediate fear, like almost recognition. It was bad, really bad. And then, just as fast, it collapses, anomaly gone, but leaving behind that feeling of being watched, now way more intense focus right on this spot.
It's a huge shift, isn't it? From analyzing reports, listening to recordings, to being right in it, experiencing something real and dangerous. which circles right back to that warning. Don't open Pandora's box.
Yeah. We saw what happens when you peek inside. Maybe accidentally kick it open. We got a taste. And we're telling that German podcast, don't go there without understanding what you're dealing with. So summing up, forced underground, dealing with the anomaly fallout, pressure from Grindman, worried about this German podcast maybe repeating our mistake because they don't have the context, all linked to a terrifying brush with Grindman Tech and Regulus 5.
So when we hear reports maybe questioning our info, downplaying the risks.
Yeah, it sounds like people operating without the whole picture, without the compendium. It's almost frustrating. They're wondering where we got our info. We were in the depot. We lived it.
The Grindman incident isn't some rumor. It's documented. It happened. And the broader point remains. Digging into obscure, dangerous info like MWF, especially without full context, carries real risks. It moves beyond intellectual analysis to messing with it. Mit in Rumspielen. Curiosity, perhaps boredom in a place like this, can push you over the line.
The line between investigating and dangerous interaction is fine, especially with forces you just don't understand. It makes you question whether it's always smart to peek inside every box, even if it doesn't have Pandora written on it.
Which brings us, perhaps unexpectedly, to a stack of new source material we recently found. Documents unearthed from an archive.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is what they seem to be about. They mention Mike's ancestry. Specifically, the figure he used to tell those wild, unbelievable stories about on the show, Mike Fried.
Right. You remember the stories? They were absolutely wild. Mike would talk about his forefathers, and honestly, we and probably most listeners just assumed he was making it all up. Völlig verrückte Anekdoten, Too Hanebüchen, too unbelievable to be true.
That was the consensus, wasn't it? Typisch Mike. Eine gute Story, aber halt wahrscheinlich frei erfunden. It fit his persona. Exaggerated, larger than life.
Exactly. But then, this unexpected discovery. These documents from an archive surfaced, and they mention a person named Mike Fried Lieberman to Pickelhausen.
The exact name Mike used.
Yeah. Mike Fried Lieberman. It's quite a thing, isn't it?
It is. So the goal now is to examine these documents to see if they lend any truth, any historical echoes to Mike's old stories. Is there a kernel of truth here, or is this just a bizarre coincidence of names and eccentric behavior? Let's dive into the documents themselves.
Okay, let's start with the Stadtfest incident from 1492. The document title is Herr Mike Fried Lieberman's Tumult auf dem Stadtfest. It describes his behavior at a city festival.
And the report is pretty direct about it. Described as ungezügelt and provokant, unruly and provocative, caused großen Ärger, a zornige Menge gathered against him. Things were getting brennlich, really heating up. They even called for the Stadtwachen, the city guards.
Yeah, a serious situation. And Mike Fried himself, he was apparently stark betrunken, heavily drunk. According to the report, he could barely remember any of it later.
Okay, that definitely fits a pattern we've seen, wouldn't you say? And his reaction. He showed remorse, apparently, but only for drinking too much Coriac, which the document says was a kind of brandy.
And here's where it gets really interesting. This Coriac, the report explicitly states he got it from a certain Schwatten, dem Kramer. Schwatten, the merchant. Schwatten. Yes, the name should sound more than familiar from Mike's own narrative.
It does, absolutely. Schwatten appearing here. That's really remarkable.
It is, and Mike Fried himself. The report says he later called the whole event a Dummenstreich, a dumb prank, downplaying the serious situation and consequences.
Dummenstreich, yes, that absolutely rings a bell. That tendency to minimize serious, sometimes destructive things he's been involved in.
Precisely. The parallels are really striking, aren't they? The similar name, this provocative behavior under the influence of alcohol, the explicit connection to this figure Schwatten, and this inclination to downplay the consequences afterwards. It reminds me strongly of Mike's own style.
So what does this mean? What does it mean for you listening if you know Mike's stories? Are these documents proof? Is there something to these crazy family anecdotes?
Proof might be a strong word for every single detail, but it certainly casts a whole new light on it. A fascinating, unsettling light. It at least suggests that maybe not everything Mike ever said was completely made up, that there could be a true core, or at least surprising historical echoes. The old assumption that it was all invented, it's definitely shaky now.
Okay, that can be said. And that leads to a final question to think about for you about this specific document. If such stories, or maybe just fragments of them, and perhaps even character traits, are passed down through generations, how much do they shape the descendants?
Could it be that Mike inherited more from this historical Mike Fried than just a strikingly similar name and a penchant for disruptive appearances?
An interesting question. Are there deeper resonances across the centuries? We're just starting to look. Definitely food for thought.
Okay, let's look at the next document. This one is from 1488. The title is Henkers Gilden Wanderung 1488, Wie Fried's Wahnsinn. Mike Fried's madness, basically. It describes the annual summer hike of the Hangman's Guild in Tecklenburg.
The setting itself is stern, disciplined, and ernste Stimmung. Serious mood. The tools are stowed. It's the Hangman's Guild, after all. And in the middle of it, Mike Fried. Described as a Neuling, a newcomer, but already with a reputation, it seems. He immediately stands out, loud, constantly laughs, and is pushy for mead early on. Trinkt schon ganz viel auf Mead, also wirklich penetrant. Really pushy about it.
That didn't go over well naturally. The report named Schreiber Thomas and Meisterknecht Rupert as being irritated.
Yeah, you can almost feel the contrast, the usual serious, disciplined atmosphere versus him coming in and disturbing it immediately. It seems almost consciously provocative, like he's testing the boundaries, seeking a reaction.
Absolutely. And it didn't take long for the next incident. At the first rest stop, Mike Fried proudly pulls out an Erbsenblaser des Todes.
A pea shooter of death. I mean, seriously, that's in an official document.
It is. And he allegedly got it from Schwattendem Kramer, a name that should sound familiar by now.
Yeah.
He already popped up in the Stadtfest report as a supplier of obscure Zeug, obscure stuff.
Schwatten. Again, that's really noticeable across multiple sources now.
He waves it around, shows little metal pellets for ammunition, and aims, quote, some shirts for a joke at the Guildmaster's hat. Luckily misses, but just the idea of this abstruse Waffe, as the report calls it, this absurd weapon, causes Riesenaufsehen, huge commotion. Meisterknecht Rupert, the foreman, is shot. Very skeptical, very critical of this behavior.
It's a real mixture, isn't it? On one hand, ridiculous, a pea shooter. On the other, dangerous, reckless, aiming at people, causing alarm in a serious setting. And Schwatten being named again as the source of bizarre, potentially dangerous things. That's a remarkable parallel to the strange devices you've mentioned Mike using, often acquired from equally dubious sources.
Yeah, totally. The source of the strangeness is consistent, centuries apart. And it continues. Midday rest. There's beer and bread, and Mike Fried starts telling wilder and wilder stories about his grandfather, Gasbold, crocodile fights, bomb disposal with chewing gum, Haarsträubend, hair-raising, Warneszeug, nonsense stuff.
Gasbold stories. That sounds suspiciously like Mike's standard repertoire of over-the-top family tales.
Yeah. With every beer, it apparently gets crazier. Meisterknecht Rupert calls it Warneszeug, meaning nonsense, unbelievable stuff. Mike Fried reacts to this criticism by getting extreme gereizt, extremely irritated, and the report is very clear here. He underscores his anger with an überaus lauten und anrüchigen Wind, an exceedingly loud and foul wind.
Oh no, oh, not again.
Yes,
Yeah.
which naturally causes disgust in the others. So here you see a very specific pattern, I think, of these Gasbold stories. Alcohol leading to extreme disinhibition, criticism being met with aggression. And the reaction isn't just verbal, but physical, gross, socially unacceptable. It makes you wonder if such very specific behaviors can really persist or be this similar over centuries.
The absolute low point comes at the Würzenbaumstump, the inn. Mike Fried is now offensichtlich richtig betrunken, obviously really drunk. Starts philosophizing about a falling technique he calls the rollende Wahnsinn, the rolling madness.
They're rolled into Wahnsinn, that phrase. I've definitely heard that in the MWF transcript somewhere before.
Exactly. He tries to demonstrate it, stumbles over benches, breaks things, Reist Geschunter, property damage. The innkeeper confronts him, and Mike Fried yells about a Verschwörung and vergifteten Wolken am Himmel. Poisoned clouds in the sky.
Vergift Wolken.
Yeah.
Another phrase that rings a strong, unsettling bell from the MWF material.
Yes. He then throws a mug, wirft dann mit einem Krug sich, causing the entire guild to be kicked out of the inn. The report specifically mentions that Meisterknecht Rupert heftig übergehen musste afterwards, had to vomit violently due to this unerträglichen Wahnsinns, this unbearable madness. He was physically ill from the sheer absurdity and disruption.
Puh. So here it completely tips from slapstick into destruction and causing serious social fallout. And then these specific conspiracy theories he conjures up, and again, these very specific, almost unique terms. Der rollende Wahnsinn, vergiftete Wolken. There's phrases that are astonishingly reminiscent of what you know from Mike, from Mikkel's vocabulary and paranoias.
They are. The specificity is incredible. And this extreme physical reaction from Rupert shows how unbearable this behavior was for people back then. The report says it at the end, summing it up. Mike Fried's talent was to turn jede Ordnung in pures Chaos. Every order into pure chaos.
Truly incredible. These details from 1488, let's quickly summarize that for you listening. Again, the name Schwatten as the source of bizarre items. It's bizarre pea shooter. The totally over-the-top Gasbold anecdotes as justification or conversation filler. Then these very specific formulations like Der Rollende Wahnsinn and Vergiftet Vulcan. The conspiracy themes as an explanation for resistance, and this behavior massively amplified by alcohol, this undeniable ability to cause chaos and trigger extreme physical reactions in others.
It's truly astonishing how these specific, often quirky details appear now in two independent sources from the late 15th century, centuries apart from Mike's stories. That makes pure coincidence of name and behavior in specific phrases very, very unlikely.
It absolutely does. It solidifies this impression of significant historical echoes. Even though you have to be careful not to overinterpret every single minor detail Mike ever mentioned. But the consistency and specificity here are really remarkable.
And that brings us to a final thought for you on this document. The report ends with the Guild considering whether such troublemakers like Mike Fried can even be tolerated anymore. When we see these detailed parallels that seem to stretch across centuries, from a 15th century document to Mike's seemingly wild stories today, how much influence do such perhaps deeply rooted character traits really have? Do these historical echoes explain more about Mike or Mikkel than just where his stories come from?
It's that question about the weight of ancestry versus one's own personality, one's own life choices.
Yeah.
Where is the balance? What do you think about that? Is personality destiny, especially when it echoes across centuries like this?
Okay, let's move on to the Emden incidents in 1493. This document is titled Vorfall in Emden, Mike Fried Leben und das Pulver. Incidents in Emden. Mike Fried Leben and the powder.
Und das Pulver. And the powder. That sounds promising. Or rather, distinctly ominous.
You could definitely say that. The report places us at a busy market day in Emden, and in the middle of it, who shows up? Our Mike Fried Leben. The report says his reputation was already known in the area.
Uh-huh. What kind of reputation?
Well, a tendency towards excessive drinking, generally rather boisterous, disruptive behavior, and apparently a fascination for everything unusual or strange.
Sounds remarkably familiar, doesn't it? And what is he up to this time?
He's apparently presenting quite loudly and perhaps boastfully a small bag of a Selsames Grogrunliches pulver, a strange gray-green powder. That's how the report describes it.
A strange powder. And given the pattern, where do you get that from this time? Let me guess.
The source is named again. A certain Schwatten dem Alchemisten? Schwatten the alchemist?
Wait, alchemist? Wasn't he called Kramer Merchant before in the earlier document?
Exactly. That's interesting, isn't it? Either Schwatten expanded his business beyond just selling herbs and potions, or the report here might be slightly exaggerating his status for dramatic effect, or perhaps both are true. Schwatten the alchemist sounds more dramatic, certainly.
And what does Mike Fried do with this stuff?
He's apparently already quite drunk, naturally, and boasts that it's an atmosphärischer Reiniger.
A what?
An atmospheric cleanser. Against bad sea air, I assume, given Emden is a port town.
Okay. And how does one cleanse the atmosphere on a market square with a strange gray-green powder, according to Mike Fried?
Well, Mike Fried's method is direct and predictably provocative. He throws the powder, and the report again emphasizes ungezügelt, unprovokant, simply into a fireball that was standing there on the market square.
Oh, no. Given the other incidents, that cannot possibly go well. I can already sense where this is heading.
Your intuition is unfortunately correct. Instead of the pleasant scent, there was, quote, a crass situation, a brutal, intense situation, according to the report.
What does crass situation mean in this context?
A dense, sulfur-colored mist erupted. Dichter, schwefelfarbener Nebel, a piercing chemical smell filled the air, stechender chemischer Geruch. And witnesses report the mist was unnatürlich kalt.
Unnaturally cold mist with a sulfur smell. That doesn't sound like any normal chemical reaction. That sounds familiar.
And then it started to hum. A low, persistent humming that grew to a deep, ominous rumbling and then swelled to a deafening roar. Ohren betäubenden Bronnen.
That's like something straight out of the Grindman reports, isn't it? How did the anomaly we experienced here? What did the people do? The market visitors caught in this?
They were, of course, in shock, overwhelmed with pure fear. The report even speaks of Vertzerten-Visionen, distorted visions, seeing Schattenwesen im Nebel, shadow creatures in the mist.
Shadow creatures, distorted visions, fear-induced paralysis, Longing for angst, a feeling as if reality was somehow tipping or warping. Naturally, panic erupted. The report details the market descending into complete chaos, merchants running away, leaving everything behind, screaming everywhere.
And the anger is directed
At Mike Fried, of course. Hexerei, Teufelsbeschwörung, witchcraft, devil summoning. Such cries were heard from the crowd. They called for the Stadtwachen, the city guards, and even the Inquisition was mentioned.
The Inquisition. Wow, that is extremely serious. That situation could have turned deadly for him in seconds.
Yes, the situation really threatened to escalate into a mob lynching. The market crowd was psychologically, apparently, completely devastated by this experience.
And the culprit, Mike Fried, what is he doing while all this is happening? Does he even realize the scale of the panic he's caused in his state?
At first, apparently not really. The report says he was in a stupor, mumbling something about a Verschwörung der Hafenmeister, a conspiracy of the harbor masters. They were after him, he claimed.
Of course. Always a conspiracy. Always the others who are to blame or are secretly attacking him.
Exactly. He saw a conspiracy of the harbor masters as the reason for the negative reaction, rather than his actions, and then he stumbles uncontrollably over a bench, making the chaos complete.
But he apparently got away with it again, right? Just like at the other incidents. Who rescued him this time? I bet Rupert and Thomas are back.
Correct. Again, Guild brothers. Meisterknecht Rupert and Schreiber Thomas are mentioned by name as pulling him from the enraged crowd. Mit sichtlichem Widerwillen, as it says. With visible reluctance.
With reluctance, I believe that immediately. It sounds like they were getting pretty tired of bailing him out of self-made disasters.
So it seems. And only then, when he was practically physically dragged out of the danger zone by his reluctant Guild brothers, only then did Mike Fried, according to the report, show visible fear. Real schiss, you might say. Pure terror.
Yes, pure, immediate fear when faced with the direct physical threat from the mob, once again saved from something much worse by others who seem obligated to help him. It's almost eerie how these patterns repeat. Schwatten provides the stuff.
Exactly.
Mike Fried acts while intoxicated, provocatively, disruptively. There's chaos, strange phenomena, psychological disturbance among witnesses.
Right. Cold mist, humming, visions.
Then come the conspiracy theories he invents to explain away the reaction, the downplaying dumber strike, dumb prank again, the memory lapses later.
And the rescue by Rupert and Thomas, who apparently have less and less desire to do so with every incident.
Yes, exactly that pattern. And what's truly fascinating, perhaps even disturbing, is that the report from 1493 itself already draws this parallel.
What? The report itself from
Yeah.
1493?
Yes. Towards the end, the writer lists these patterns of behavior and explicitly notes a bemerkenswerte ähnlich im Wesen und Verhalten zu seinem Nachfahren, a remarkable similarity in being and behavior to his descendant.
To Mike. The writer in the 15th century sees the similarity to the Mike we know from the MWF transcripts. How is that possible?
To Mike, yes. The report writer in 1493 is noting the uncanny similarity in character and behavior between this Mike Fried and someone they anticipate, or perhaps someone they have encountered. It's a strange way to phrase it. Seinem Nachfahren, his descendant. And the report even compares the psychological effect of the missed incident to a later incident designated E605.
E605, so 605, is that what that could mean? A historical document from 1493 referencing a specific MWF episode number. That's insane.
It's speculation, of course, but given the context, it's hard not to wonder. A source from that time explicitly noting that so clearly, that this pattern, this character type, persists across time.
Exactly. That makes the idea of mere coincidence less and less likely.
Yeah.
This consistency across the documents, combined with the historical writer noting the similarity, is really strong evidence for a deep, possibly unsettling continuity.
Absolutely. This Emden report from 1493 fits seamlessly, reinforcing this image of historical echoes and pattern repetition across centuries. And how does the report end?
It concludes by stating that the Guild now has to deliberate on how to deal with this Mike Fried after this incident. This is becoming a recurring problem for them.
Understandable. And that raises a question also for you listening. If a source from the late 15th century sees these similarities so clearly across almost 500 years, what weight do you give such connections?
Do these documented patterns perhaps explain more about Mike or Mikkel than just where his anecdotes come from? Do they perhaps point to, well, deeply rooted traits that persist across generations? Is character inherited in some way?
Ancestry versus personality. Yes, that is definitely food for thought, especially when the historical accounts are this specific and weirdly prescient.
Okay, we have one more document to look at from this set, an official complaint regarding Mike Fried Lieben zu Pickelhausen at the Schafheim Sheep Festival in 1491.
Schafheim Sheep Festival, 1491. The target for you today is clear. We're going to examine exactly what happened back then according to this document.
Exactly. Straight into the details of this report. What are the main points of this accusation against him?
Well, things seem to have been quite lively.
You could say that. And how? The setting is the annual sheep festival in Schafheim. The highlight. The judging of the most beautiful sheep. A solemn occasion.
Okay. An important event back then, I presume. The pride of the village.
Absolutely. And right into this, let's say, festive and serious mood, Mike Fried bursts in, according to this report, offensichtlich stark getrunken. Obviously heavily drunk.
Another pattern holding true. Drunk and disruptive at a solemn event.
He stumbles forward, but not empty-handed. He has two, höchst merkwürdige Gerätschaften with him. Highly strange contraptions. The report actually describes them.
Contraptions, what exactly does it say? That sounds fascinating. Devices again.
So the description is remarkable. It speaks of a Kälte Quelle des Unbehagens.
A what? A cold source of discomfort?
Yes. A metal ball that allegedly radiates intense cold and emits an unheimliches Flüstern, an eerie whispering. It's described in the document as something fast schon fantastisch beschrieben, almost fantastically described.
Yes, totally. For an official complaint from the 15th century, that is incredibly descriptive, almost literary. What did they aim to achieve with that description? To portray him as particularly evil or eerie, perhaps?
Good question. It emphasizes the unnaturalness of it. And the second thing is called a kaleidoscope des Kreischens.
Kaleidoscope of shrieking. Okay. That definitely doesn't sound very soothing either.
No, a cylinder that apparently emits grelle Lichtblitz, garish, intense light flashes, and creates a schrillen, echt durchdringenden Ton, a shrill, truly piercing tone. And he apparently activates both simultaneously.
Okay, wait a minute. So he walks into a sheep judging contest, drunk, carrying devices that emit icy cold, eerie whispering, garish light flashes, and piercing, painful noise, and activates them. Right in the middle of a village festival in the 15th century.
Exactly that. Imagine it. The shock, the sensory overload in that setting.
The consequences were surely severe. What does the document say happened?
Verheerend. Devastating. The prize sheep, the symbol of the festival, goes into total panic. Total panic, breaks out of its pen, and runs blindly into the crowd.
Oh dear. Chaos ensuing.
Other animals follow, naturally. It results in complete chaos, angst, verwirrung. Complete chaos, fear, confusion among the festival goers. The festival, the social highlight of the year for Schafheim, is complete im Eimer. Completely ruined.
That alone would have been reason enough for a proper, perhaps severe punishment back then.
Absolutely. And Mike Fried's reaction. The report paints the picture of a man who seems, völlig ahnungslos. Completely clueless about the devastation he's caused.
Really, even after seeing the panic, clueless.
He apparently mumbles something about a Verschwörung gegen ihn, a conspiracy against him. He sees the panic as a planned attack on himself. He can or will sich später Karma erinnern, barely remember later, once he's sober. And he dismisses the whole thing as a dummen Streich, just a prank.
Sounds incredibly familiar, that kind of reaction. The combination of denial, paranoia, memory loss, and downplaying serious consequences. And the punishment, the festival court was quickly convened. The verdict, Tejumpranger, days on the pillory. Okay, that was common back then for causing public disturbance.
It was a standard humiliating punishment. But here the story takes that special Mike Fried turn, doesn't it? The document details something rather extraordinary.
You mean the olfactory turn? Yes. The pillory punishment konnte nämlich nicht wie geplant durchgeführt werden. It could not be carried out as planned.
Exactly. Had to be stopped after only 3 hours. And the reason, according to the official complaint, is rather unique.
And this is the part that seems almost comedic in its absurdity, if the occasion hadn't been so serious for the village. According to the report, Mike Fried developed, and I'm quoting the spirit of the language here, überaus anrüchige Darmwinde, exceedingly foul intestinal winds.
Seriously, that specific detail is in an official complaint from 1491. That's wow.
Yes. Of such intensity that the guards trying to restrain him and the surrounding citizens attempting to watch die Nähe nicht mehr ertragen konnten, they could no longer bear being near him. Der Gestank muss unerträglich gewesen sein. The stench must have been unbearable.
Wow. You have to wonder if that was truly the only reason, or if the authorities were maybe, secretly glad for an excuse to get rid of this disruptive figure without having to endure days of public spectacle and stink.
It's an interesting thought. The document leaves that open to interpretation, but the result is clear. Because of this, let's say, extreme Unannehmlichkeit, extreme unpleasantness, the pillory punishment was changed to Banishment.
Banishment, just like that.
Mike Fried was banished from Schafheim auf der Stelle on the spot with the order Niemals zurückzukehren, never to return, a truly denkwürdiger Abgang, a memorable departure from the village driven out by his own emissions.
What's truly remarkable is also the final sentence of this document. Just like the Emden report, it seems to look forward. This vague hint about Ähnlichkeiten im Verhalten zu Vorfahren und sogar erwarteten Nachfahren. Similarities in behavior to ancestors and even expected descendants.
That is strange for such an official paper. As if this disruptive element, this character type, is expected to reappear in the family line. It seems to confirm that the pattern was noted and perhaps even anticipated centuries ago. So, laying this much. Emmett, what's this? On the document, under my finger here.
What's wrong? What have you found? Let me see.
What is this? This was stuck quite inconspicuously on the lower edge of the parchment. It's totally brittle, looks like the tiny remnant of an old seal. Hardly recognizable, just a bit of wax, faded.
Let me see. Oh yes, extremely fragile. But there are still very faint letter stampings on it. You can just barely make them out. Wait a minute, that looks like Grund. Für Grundmann, für Regelu.
What? Grund? Grundmann Regelu. That can't be. Those are the names from Speaks, seemingly stunned voice trailing off from the other stuff.
Yes, exactly those, from the completely different documents. The modern ones. Grindman. Regulus.
The ones about these modern companies and these strained incidents. Grindman Frieden's work, Regulus 5, the anomaly we just experienced right here at the depot.
Yes. How in the world do these names end up on a seal remnant from a document from 1491 about this chaotic, drunk ancestor causing mayhem at a sheep festival? That just doesn't fit together at all. That makes absolutely no sense in any conventional way. Or it makes a sense that is much, much more unsettling than we thought.
Is it an unglaublich bizarre Zufall? An unbelievably bizarre coincidence, a random scattering of names across time? Or does this point to a connection, eine Verbindung hin, that is, viel unheimlicher als wir dachten, a connection spanning über was, 500 years?
That turns everything on its head. Everything we thought we knew about Mike Fried, about these newer Grindman documents, about how deep this goes, it's staggering.
We thought we were just analyzing a bizarre anecdote from the late Middle Ages and now we stumble upon these names. These names, Grindman, Regulus, right here on this old parchment. Names you know from completely different modern, dangerous contexts.
What does that mean? When these names, Grindman, Regulus, which you know from a Grindman Frieden's work reports, from the Regulus 5 incident at the depot, from the GR5 receiver, suddenly appear on a document from the 15th century describing this chaos maker, Mike Fried, what do you make of this impossible connection?
That is a question that will definitely not let us go for now. It implies a scale, a depth we hadn't even considered.
Wow. Wow. Let's try and synthesize what these Mike Fried documents collectively reveal, especially in light of that seal.
Right. First, Mike Fried Liebermann zu Pickelhausen was a real historical figure. His name is strikingly, undeniably similar to Mikkel.
And his behavior. Consistently documented across multiple incidents, a city festival, a guild hike, a market day, a sheep festival, was prone to public drunkenness and causing chaos. Always provoking, disruptive, showing disregard for solemn or disciplined occasions. Using strange devices, often sourced from a figure named Schwatten.
Crucially, he obtained strange, potentially dangerous items from that figure named Schwatten, who appears as both a Kramer, a merchant, and an alchemist in these different reports. That connection to Schwatten is explicit in multiple documents from the 15th century.
And he repeatedly downplayed the seriousness of his actions, calling them a dumb and strike, minimizing the damage and the consequences even when it led to mob anger or banishment.
He often attributed problems to conspiracies. Verschwörung der Antiknechte, Verschwörung der Hafenmeister, Verschwörung gegen ihn, shifting blame, seeing plots against him everywhere.
And he suffered memory loss regarding the events while drunk. Konnte sich später kaum erinnern. A consistent pattern of disinhibition and selective amnesia surrounding his destructive acts.
He was repeatedly rescued or bailed out by others. Thomas, Rupert, his guild brothers, often described as being pulled away mit sichtlichem Widerwillen, with visible reluctance. He seems to rely on others to extract him from the situations he creates.
And here's the kicker. The historical documents themselves explicitly note remarkable, deep similarities in character and behavior. The Emden report notes a bemerkenswerte ähnlichem Wesen und Verhalten zu seinem Nachfahr. Remarkable similarity to his descendant. The Schafheim document hints at similarities to ancestors and sogar erwartete Nachfahren, even expected descendants. Centuries ago, they saw these patterns stretching forward, potentially to Mike.
So these aren't just made-up anecdotes. There is a documented historical basis for these patterns of behavior and connections, specifically to Schwatten in Mike's family line. The assumption that his stories were pure fiction definitely wackelt now. It's shaky. There are erstaunliche historische echoes. Astonishing historical echoes.
Absolutely. The character type, the behavior, the connection to a figure named Schwatten, documented in the 15th century, and then the shocking discovery. Finding that tiny, brittle remnant of an old seal attached to the 1491 Schaffheim document.
Yeah, almost overlooked it. Just a small piece of wax on the edge of the parchment, but on it, ganz schwache Buchstabenprägungen. Very faint letter stampings.
Which we could just barely make out.
Yeah.
For Grindman, for a regular...
Grindman, for regular.
The shock, the disbelief, it felt impossible.
Yes.
Das kann doch nicht sein, but that can't be right. Passt doch absolut null zusammen. It doesn't fit at all. It gibt überhaupt keinen Sinn. Makes no sense. Stellt doch alles auf den Kopf. Turns everything upside down.
Right. These names, Grundmann Regulu, strongly linked to the modern, dangerous MWF saga. Grindman Friedenswerk, Regulus 5, the Compendium, the Anomaly Incident at the Depot, the GR5 receiver, appearing on a 15th century document about a chaotic, drunk ancestor from Pickelhausen.
It's baffling. Is this an unglaublich bizarre Zufall? An unbelievably bizarre coincidence? A random scattering of significant names? Or does this point to a connection, eine Verbindung hin, that is viel, viel unheimlicher als wir dachten? A connection spanning über as of 500 years.
It absolutely turns everything we thought we knew upside down. About Mike Fried, about the newer Grindman documents, about how deep this goes.
And that brings us to the implications of finding that Grindman Regulus seal fragment on the Mike Fried document. It's not just about Mike's ancestors' historical quirks anymore. It potentially ties his family history and these documented patterns directly into the core dangerous mystery of the MWF world, Grindman and Regulus 5.
This could indicate a much deeper, longer-running influence or pattern related to these forces than we ever conceived. Could Mike's personality traits, or the specific incidents surrounding him and his ancestor, the chaos, the strange devices, the connection to Schwatten, the paranoia, could they be part of some larger, multi-generational narrative or effect linked to Grindman and Regulus?
And we have to connect this back to the real-world danger we've experienced. Being watched, forced to flee, dealing with Grindman tech, and the Regulus 5 linked anomaly right here at the depot. This discovery suggests that this dangerous world is not just a modern internet phenomenon, but potentially has roots stretching back centuries, running through Mike's lineage. It makes our current predicament feel even more complex, perhaps even predestined somehow. It's a chilling thought.
Which leads us back to that mention in our notes, the German podcast. They're also digging into MWF. Even the Spätere Zeug, the later stuff, which feels sensible, gefährlich sogar, sensitive, dangerous even. And they sound apparently pretty enthusiastic about it, and they're speculating about where presumably we are getting our info.
Yeah, and frankly that concerns us a lot. Because our key worry is this. They likely do nicht das volle context. They don't have the full picture. Specifically, they are missing the importance of the compendium, unsere Messesammlung. Our huge collection, transcripts, notes, files, connections, Grindman reports, vision unit, all of it. It malt ein sehr spezifisch, oft verstörend Bild. It paints a very specific, often disturbing picture, built up over years of meticulous collection and cross-referencing.
And that lack of context is dangerous. Without the background the compendium provides, they might leicht verpassen, wie ernst das Ganze sich anfühlt. They could easily miss how serious it all feels, how dangerous the implications are. It's like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. Versucht ein Jigsaw-Puzzle zu lösen, mit die Hälfte der Teile fehlen. The picture they form will be wrong, and it might lead them to conclusions or actions they are not prepared for.
Precisely. And that's why this deep dive feels particularly urgent, even from here. Because if this German podcast is out there, maybe presenting an incomplete, perhaps even naive version, well, people might be getting strange, perhaps dangerously naive ideas, especially about our recent experiences. The Grindman prototype thing here at the train depot, the anomaly.
Yes. What's worrying is how much they seem to know, even about recent events, like the anomaly that happened right here. How do they know about that detail? And what do they really understand about Regulus 5, about Grindman Friedenswerk?
Yeah, we stress this in our notes. Regulus 5 isn't just theory for us anymore. It became very, very real here at the depot, triggered by that Grindman box. Yeah. The one that proved Regulus 5 was real, tangible, something that does things. And it was bad. Really bad.
Which is why we wrote down that direct warning, aimed at the German podcast. Don't seek Pandora's box. Such nicht Pandora's box.
And we know what that means, based on our experience here.
Yeah.
We saw what happens when you peek inside. When you accidentally kick it open, we get a taste of what these forces might be capable of. And we're telling that German podcast, don't go there without understanding what you're dealing with. They might accidentally trigger something real and devastating. The Konsequenzen könnten verheerend sein. The consequences could be devastating, not just for them, but potentially for anyone nearby, or even on a wider scale, if the anomaly here is any indication.
And there's an irony here, isn't there? The German podcast is wondering where we got our info, maybe questioning our info, downplaying the risks, fragen unsere Infos, herunterspielen die Risiken, saying it's just internet weirdness maybe, but we were there. Wir waren im Depot. Wir haben es erlebt. We were in the depot. We experienced it.
The Grindman incident isn't some rumor. It's documented. It happened. And the broader point remains. Digging into obscure, potentially dangerous info like MWF, especially the later material, and critically, without the full context the compendium provides, carries real documented risks. It moves beyond intellectual analysis to messing with it, mit ihm rumspielen. Curiosity, perhaps a lack of understanding of the true nature of the material, maybe even boredom in a place like the depot, can push you over that line.
The line between investigating and dangerous interaction is fine, especially with forces you just don't understand. Forces that might span centuries and seem tied to disturbing historical patterns and powerful modern organizations. It makes you question whether it's always smart to peek inside every box, even if it doesn't have Pandora written on it.
And our current situation. On the run, under pressure, feeling watched intensely since the anomaly. That's evidence that the danger is real now, having moved way beyond just analyzing strange stuff online. It has become our reality.
So what does this all mean? To summarize, the historical Mike-Fried Liebman zu Pickelhausen was a real figure. The documents reveal striking, documented parallels in behavior and character traits with Mike, with Mikkel, across centuries. Drunkenness, chaos, Schwatten connections, downplaying, conspiracy theories being bailed out, and the historical writers themselves noting the uncanny similarity and anticipating descendants.
And then, the astonishing and deeply disturbing discovery of the Grünmann-Regelou seal fragment on a 15th century document about Mike Fried, suggesting a deep, long-spanning connection between this ancestry, these patterns, and the modern, dangerous forces of Greidmann-Friedenswerk and Regulus 5. It feels like a pattern or perhaps an influence across time.
And finally, the serious concern and warning issued to the new German MWF podcast, highlighting the critical lack of context they likely have, especially the compendium, and the very real danger they face if they continue digging into sensitive areas like Grindman Tech and Regulus 5 without understanding the devastating potential consequences, mirroring our own recent perilous experience here at the depot.
As for us, our situation is precarious. On the run, facing threats, trying to make sense of it all while dealing with the fallout of the Grindman anomaly and pressure from Grindman itself. But we are absolutely not giving up. We will never give up on trying to understand this. We'll try and stay in touch with you through any means possible. JFI maybe. Maybe release old recordings when we can. Keep searching.
So a final thought for you listening. Build on these themes. The weight of ancestry, the persistence of patterns of behavior across centuries, the danger of information, the blurry line between investigation and interference. What do these historical echoes truly reveal about deep-seated traits passed down through generations?
And consider the question raised by the German podcast situation and that Grindman seal. When obscure, potentially dangerous information like this starts appearing in disparate places, historical archives, modern internet phenomena, other podcasts, is it just coincidence? Does it imply a larger unseen network or force at play, one that might influence people and events over centuries?
Revisit that final question from the Deflex script. Fract. Ask yourselves, who can you trust? Given how our own trust has been shaken by recent events, by who knew where we were, by that delivery, how easily seemingly unrelated pieces of information, like an old seal found on a 15th century document, can shatter assumptions and reveal hidden, potentially catastrophic dangers. What does it mean about the nature of reality and of investigation itself when the historical past is so explicitly connected to the potentially catastrophic present through such bizarre, undeniable links?